Hey, what's up you guys? This is John Chacon, and this will be your instructional video on the kettlebell snatch. Now, with this movement, we're going to be taking the kettlebell from our hips or from the floor to an overhead position in one single explosive movement. The snatch, at its foundation, is very, very similar to the swing, where we're going to be using that hip hinge motion with our hips to develop that explosive power. And when we drive that kettlebell forward, instead of letting it continue going forward like we would in a swing, we're actually going to guide the kettlebell using our shoulder, elbow, wrist, and hand to guide it straight overhead and do what I call punch the ceiling. Now, the first repetition of a snatch, a one-arm snatch with the kettlebell, is always going to be from the floor because it allows you to set up your ankles, knees, hips, back, shoulder, hands, grip. Everything is set up, as opposed to just walking up to the kettlebell, picking it up, and then just kind of letting things go as they will. Set yourself up for success and get it started from the ground. Now, as you approach the kettlebell, here's going to be my steps. I'll show you from both the front and from behind, okay? Now, actually I'll show you from the side first, and then I'll show you from the front. I'm going to start back about 1.5 feet from that kettlebell. Some people might be closer, some people might be further apart. I'm going to be about 1.5 feet. Now, I'm going to center that kettlebell on my body, and I'm going to bring my feet a little bit wider, or about shoulder width apart. Toes straight ahead, keep my heels down. Before I even think about touching that kettlebell, I'm going to set up my ankles, knees, and the hips first. I'm going to spread the floor with my feet, drive the knees out, butt back, lower my hips, keeping a nice flat torso. Next, I'm going to reach down, grab the center of that handle on that kettlebell, and tilt it back. My wrist is straight, my arm has a straight line from my hand to my shoulder, and my hips are loaded up. It's like a slingshot, just ready to fire. From here, I'm going to take in my belly breath, swing it back behind my hips, explode it backwards. As I drive that kettlebell forward by extending my hips, I'm going to drive it and guide it straight up above me. It'll look like this. All one explosive movement. When you finish the rep, that arm should be completely locked out. Your arms should be in line with your ear. Wrist should be nice and straight. Now, what do we do from here? We got to bring this thing down, right? So there's two different ways. If you're learning, this first way is going to be the best. All you're going to do is lower it as if you were lowering it from a press motion. Bring it down to what I call the rack position. Keep your forearm nice and straight. Keep your wrist straight, vertical forearm, elbow in nice and tight. From the side it'll look like this. And then I'm going to lower it under control back to that swing position so I can return the kettlebell to its overhead extended position. It'll look like this. Allow that kettlebell to go behind your hips, guys. If you just let it drop straight down, you're not going to get any power from it. And I'll show the difference. Here's the first one where I'm actually going to load it up and explode up and forward. Okay? What I don't want you to do is just let it drop down. You're going to have a hard time picking that sucker back up. Let it swing behind your hips, explode forward and up. That's probably one of those areas where I see most people have fault. They don't allow their hips to produce the momentum for this movement. If you're struggling with your arm, your shoulder, your hand to make this work, it's not going to work. The reason the snatch, especially with the kettlebell, is so useful for athletic movements is because it uses that hip and knee extension so powerfully, and it also incorporates your upper back. Very similar to if you're using a dumbbell for a clean or a snatch, or even the barbell version. For a lot of people getting into that barbell snatch, okay, it's really difficult to get in there. So a snatch with a kettlebell is a great variation. The other reason people will like the snatch with the kettlebell is because it allows for less impact on joints. If you've ever seen a dumbbell snatch or a barbell snatch, I'm not going to say they're like jerking the movement, but it's very abrupt. It involves a lot of power, a lot of speed. The kettlebell, it's more smooth, and it kind of grooves everything out, especially when you're bringing it overhead. One thing I want to touch on with that overhead portion is allow that kettlebell to wrap around your hands. I call it a corkscrew. It's a little difficult to explain, so I will try to demonstrate it my best with a smaller kettlebell that I can handle in a slower motion. Okay? Commonly when people are doing a snatch, the biggest fault I ever see is they allow that kettlebell to do what I call a half moon. They allow it to come out in front of them and then swing up. And they're never letting that arm bend or anything. And what happens is eventually that kettlebell has got to come to a stop. So instead of that kettlebell wrapping around their wrist gently and gradually and smoothly, it flips and then it comes down and smacks the wrist. And it looks something like this. Starting out in front, same setup, everything looks fine. Swing it forward, up and over, slams down on the wrist. Okay, over time that can become a problem and you'll start ending up with bruises. You'll show up at work, people will think someone's beating on you, okay? So don't let it happen. The way that you can remedy that is by using your shoulder, elbow, and wrist to guide that kettlebell. Once you load it up behind your hips and you explode forward and up, shrug that shoulder, drive the elbow and wrist up towards the ceiling, punch the ceiling. As you do so, the kettlebell is allowed to wrap around your wrist. Has this motion, wraps around, and you gradually let it go down. In real time, it'll look something like this. Center myself on the kettlebell, 1.5 foot distance behind it, feet shoulder width, toes straight ahead, heels down. Spread the floor with the feet, lower the hips, grab the center of the handle, tilt it back. Taking your belly breath, swing behind your hips, explode forward and up. On the way down, you can either come down at the shoulder or you can come all the way back down. Let the kettlebell wrap around your wrist. It should be a very smooth motion. If you're having a hard time getting used to mechanics, simply use a lower weight bell. Or maybe you don't have the hip hinge down yet. Always a good idea to get that down and master that swing motion. You can see it in one of these other instructional videos, okay? That has been your instructional on the snatch. Always start from the ground. Load your hips. Punch the ceiling. Make a nice straight path for that kettlebell. It should move straight up in front of your body. It should not be moving out, away from your body, but rather right in front. Make sure that your shoulders, elbows, and wrists are just as involved in this movement as your hips, but make sure that the majority of the power is coming from those hips, the glutes, the hamstrings, the quads, everything getting loaded up. Last but not least, use that corkscrew method, okay? It's gonna save your wrists and it's gonna feel a lot better. You'll be able to do kettlebell snatches your whole life, okay? It's gonna pay off. Incorporate kettlebell snatches when you want to. You can use it during strength days, conditioning days, or hey, it's just one of those days you need some variety in there, okay? This has been John Chacon with your Kettlebell Snatch Instructional. Take care, stronger every day. Peace.